Are you a fan of pro wrestling, comedy, and combat sports? Then we have the podcast for you because we cover that and much, much more.
Do you like to debate with your friends? Do we have the perfect segment for you? It's the 531, where we take any given subject, break it down to a top 5. From there, we debate it down to 3, and then into that number 1 spot.
If you want to get a hold of us, find us on our social medias. Search Working Fans Podcast on any major social media platform. And if you want to find the podcast, search for us on any major podcast platform, as well as YouTube.
Working Fans Podcast. We put in the work so you don't have to.
All right, everybody, it's the Working Fans Combatcast with another episode. I believe episode 24 right now. We're just plugging away. 25 coming up. It's the man they call Dave. It's Chevarooney, and we are going to talk combat sports. But before we do anything, Chevy, tell them what's coming up.
All right, let's see what we got. We got December 11th, big UFC pay-per-view, 269, Oliveira versus Poirier. The whole card is super stacked, like top to bottom. Very excited. And then on December 18th, we're going to have UFC Fight Night, Derek the Black Beast Lewis versus Chris Dukakis, big heavyweight fight.
Yes.
Then at the end of the year, we're going to do the episode will come out on Christmas, but it'll be our wrap-up show. So we'll talk about our favorite fights of the year and all that. Then the week after, that'll be January 1st. We're going to do a prediction show for what we think the new, the best fights of the year or what we want to see in the upcoming year and, who we think will be champ, all that kind of stuff.
Who will lose their belt? We'll talk about it. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm really excited for this Poirier Charles Oliveira card. That's the one that's got me most excited. So, can't wait for that next week. But, before we get into the first subject, we're going to talk a little boxing. You saw some highlights and stuff this weekend. I do have to say, Mr. AJ Strangebrew, I talked to him this weekend, by the way, too. And we will try to get him on when we start doing another boxing 5-3-1. He's not as big into MMA, but he's really into the history of boxing. So I did talk to him. That'll be on the work. I know Randy's listening. Randy will appreciate this.
Yeah.
Shout
out Randy Oscar.
Yeah.
Number one fan.
AJ, if you listen to this, I don't know if you listen to our podcast, but if you listen to our podcast, we got some love for you. All right. So tell me about this fight you saw this weekend. I know some of the guys here. Yeah,
so we had Teofimo Lopez, who was the champ, undefeated champ. He held a bunch of belts. He was fighting George Campos Jr., the Aussie, who's also undefeated. Campos was a 13-1 underdog. There was a bunch of shit talking before the fight. Teofimo's dad is his coach, and Campos is Campos's coach. His father is his coach as well. Yes. They had issues at like a media scrum where Teofimo's dad is a big loudmouth and came walking. He stepped over a line he shouldn't have, apparently, coming at George Sr. And there's punches thrown and it'd be broken up and all that. And then Teofimo's dad was yelling, my son's going to knock your son out in the first round, all this. So basically gave away a game plan because Teofimo came out in the first round. This fight was at MSG. So that's where Teofimo's from, is New York. So a big hometown crowd for him. Comes out in the first round, just guns blazing, trying to throw heavy overhand rights to knock out George. But George played it real smart. He was eating some shots, but wearing them well. And he ended up knocking down Lopez at the end of the first round. And he caught him real clean. It was it opened his big eye opener for him. Mm-hmm. And Teofimo acknowledged it, so you could see on his face, like, okay, yeah, you got me. It was a pretty back and forth fight. There's like streaks where 3 rounds, George would win, and then 3 rounds, Teofimo would win, but they were all pretty close. And then George got rocked in the 9th round, I think it was. Then he came back and dominated the 11th and 12th round. So it ended up going to a decision. It was a split decision for Campos Jr. And Teofimo, as soon as the first card was read, was already in shock. He went on a whole spiel afterwards. Right. He took the mic when Campos was being interviewed and said, I got robbed or whatever. He said, I won 10 of those 12 rounds, and the hometown crowd for him just started booing him, which was pretty shocking. It was not a good look for him. I know a lot of people online, a lot of boxers and boxing insiders and all that were giving him a hard time, calling him a sore loser and all that. But when you're undefeated, Deontay Wilder, sometimes you just don't handle a loss very well. I mean, it's possible he was in there and he thought he was winning. You're getting punched in the face, so he could be concussed or whatever. He did get knocked down in the first round, so he could have just been concussed the rest of the fight and thought he was winning all these rounds, but that's not what I saw.
Yeah. Also, too, one thing about boxing, too, traditionally, these losses mean a lot more than they say like in the UFC or MMA in general. You don't see a lot of top stars in boxing that have 7-8 losses. Part of that is because boxing historically has done a really good job of promoting your undefeated fighters or your fighters that have only 1 loss. And that's how they kind of build people up. Sometimes it's been traditionally too that a lot of these fighters will fight lesser guys in the beginning of their career, and they're structurally planned out to get, X amount of wins, and they're built up before their big fights. So when they do lose, they don't handle it well. There's also a lot more. It's hard to say because there's only so many elite, big name boxers as opposed to MMA. I feel like there's a lot more, even though the pay scale, everyone so boxing pays more. Like we've talked about this before. Like there's a lot of boxers that we don't even know or hear about.
Right, they're making nothing.
Right, but when you do get to those elite paying boxers, I would say I feel like the showmanship and a lot of the you can call it cringe, like the theatrics. Like you hear about like hardcore MMA fans will sometimes get online and comments and be like, "Oh man, UFC becoming WWE. Oh man, UFC. This is all pro wrestling now." Like, look at boxing. Like this isn't what you talked about. Like there, we got 2 dads arguing with each other. Deontay Wilder and
he's wearing a fucking suit of armor to come out. Like that's definitely some WWE shit, if you ask me.
Right. There's like always these pro wrestling, like always the way they handle their losses. So it's whatever. But interesting that producer Joe's texting me right now about this coming week's Bellator card, which we'll talk about that pretty soon too. So that's ironic, but so that's distraction. I let it all hang out here, folks. I don't do but it's just I did read an article on sportingnews.com about how Campos said that was his plan, though, was to bait him into a firefight and get him emotional, and it looks like it worked. And I think another thing too, boxing traditionally does too, is usually if you have a star like Lopez, who's like a 13-1 favorite, typically there's a lot of shadiness with the judges. That's where the stuff like that. They don't put a guy who comes in there and and puts on the better form. You aren't necessarily going to win. It might be a draw or a loss.
Especially in your hometown.
Right.
Right.
But I think, he wasn't ready for that. I think he probably thought, hey, I did enough. This fight was close. And you got to, that's where that adage, even though it doesn't actually make sense because mathematically you're still judging round by round. But there's that thing of you have to beat the champ, right? So he probably felt like that. Oh, he didn't do enough to really beat me, so I'm the champ. Nah, man. They didn't see it that way. And then your own people booed you because you're a sport. I think it sounds like kind of like it was just. So, hey, probably be a big money rematch down the road, though. So good for those guys when that happens. I think you were saying too, there's some boxing this weekend too coming up.
Right. So after the fight, Campos actually called out Devin Haney, who holds the WBC lightweight championship belt. He's fighting this weekend against Joseph Jojo Diaz. I don't know a lot about Jojo Diaz. As we get more into boxing, we'll know. He's definitely a top level fighter. He has some big name fights. Devin Haney, he's a star in the making for sure. So I assume he gets it done. But I did see an interview where he's talking about he's going to learn from Tiafoe's mistake and he's not going to overlook his opponent. So lesson learned for him, hopefully. Tough fight ahead of him, though, I think. I assume he gets it done, and then hopefully we see him against Campos.
And then that is going to be on DAZN. And I'm just doing a quick Google search, and it looks like it's saying it'll be the main card is set to get underway 5 p.m. Local time, which is out in Vegas.
Vegas, yep.
So they're saying Ring Rocks at approximately 8:15 on the Vegas Strip. So that's probably they're thinking the main card. So Eastern, that's probably like 11:15. So, and that's never, kind of,
right. Boxing, you just gotta sit and wait.
11 and 12, maybe. Yeah. It's probably a good estimate. So yeah, producer Joe here texting me here. The Bellator card this weekend. We're actually going to be there in attendance again. Mr. AJ Strangebrew. Maybe he didn't know for sure we were going to get him a segment, so he wanted to sweeten the deal. He got us tickets through a family member, I believe. So we're going to be there to watch Sergio Pettis versus Koraguchi, yeah. Which we talked before. He's fought in the UFC. He lost to Mighty Mouse basically with 1 second left in the 5th round. He was gonna lose the fight anyway. But that was young. He's since gone on and won the Ryzen title. Defended it multiple times, lost it, and just won it back. And then we have Sergio Pettis, who was in the UFC, Anthony Pettis' brother, doing well in there. Now he comes over to Bellator. He's the bantamweight champion. And we talked about this before, and we'll talk more about Aldo and Font, the main event, coming up this week on ESPN 31. But that's just bantamweight. It's just such a stacked division, like all around. I mean, these are two quality fighters that I won't say are better than the UFC elite, but they could be there. I think I said I was rooting for Sergio last time, and I was going to probably pick Sergio. I've been thinking about this a little more. I'm still rooting for Sergio, but I think Koraguchi is probably really got him. Like, I've been looking more at some of the fights too. He's very well-rounded. Like, he can strike, he can grapple, submission. And not to say that Sergio isn't, but I feel like Koraguchi has a lot more, despite the fact, Sergio's fresh off the UFC and he's got Anthony Pettis and a big gym. I feel like Koraguchi's got a lot more big fight experience fighting for titles. And that experience, especially when you're looking at two, elite level athletes, I feel is going to be the difference here.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I, would love to pick Sergio with my heart, but my brain tells me Koraguchi. The only thing we don't know, so Koraguchi's, I won't say weathered, but he has a lot of miles on him as far as fights go. Sergio is reaching his prime, of his athletic career. This is the point in his career where he could be getting exponentially better with every fight. So you never know if we're going to see the best version of him. His best version, he could beat Koraguchi. So it's possible we see him win. That's what makes the fight exciting. I think stylistically, Koraguchi is more well-rounded. So if the fight goes to the ground, I like his chances. Sergio's exciting and quick with a stand-up. So if it's a stand-up fight, that certainly favors Sergio.
Yeah. It's cool. I like the fact that we have two promotion, both champions fighting here. It's very cool. I like promotional matches like this. I wish UFC would do this a little more. But they're the big dogs, and they're not going to just do that.
They don't want to give any shine to any of the other promotions is the whole thing. So you get why they don't do it. Well, it sucks as fans.
Yeah. Like they don't even want to mess with boxing anymore. Like they did that once, and I think they did that strategically because they knew what that fight was going to mean just for them too. Like you had to get behind this Mayweather deal because that
there's
fight
just too much money to be made.
Too much money to be made by everybody. It was so huge, and even O'Connor, I don't want to say it was his downfall, but he hasn't won an MMA fight since then.
Except for Cowboy.
Oh, such a Cowboy. Right. Yeah. Yep. But yeah, he just hasn't had any luck since then. I think I think that took a lot of his drive out of him. But that being said, oh my God, the spotlight and the shine. I mean, the ESPN Plus deal, I want to say, and all that stuff came after that too. Like you really put yourself in a big time. So you had to do it, but they don't like to. Like if you look at it now, like they don't have any like. You got Usman talking about Canelo, and they don't want to do that. And they know what's going to happen, especially if it's the boxing. But you did hear Dana. Yeah, if he wants to come over here, yeah, we'll do that all day.
Yeah, no one's going to do that. It's a guaranteed loss.
Right. But Bellator's in a different position. You're trying to gain shine. You're trying to gain attention. So you almost have to do things like this. I like the fact that they have to do things like this, though, because, like I said, it makes it more interesting, at least to me.
For them, I think they could get, a new audience from something like this. They get Ryzen is a Asian-based company, right. So they could, get some shine, get some new fans, a new fan base in Asia when you do these kinds of things. So I think that's what they're really going for. And same with Ryzen, they're trying to become more of a well-known. If they send their champion over here and he dominates the Bellator champion, right. People are going to be like, oh. They got some good fighters. Maybe we should check out this Ryzen show. So it works for them, but I get why the UFC doesn't do it because they're not going to get any bigger than they are. They're known globally. So
yeah, absolutely. They're the big dogs. So that being said, they're the big dogs. Sometimes when you're the big dogs, you're going to let talent go. So we'll talk about that for a little bit here. We just saw
like the WWE. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
They could be in trouble, Bellator or Ryzen could be the next AEW.
Right. Well, they're definitely, there is a little something to that too. It's interesting. Like these companies that are like nipping on the heels. But and that's the thing, right? So Kevin Lee gets let go. I was going to talk about that. So Kevin Lee gets let go. Do we see him in Bellator, you think, or maybe PFL? Where do you think he ends up?
I think he gets his pick of where he wants to go. He's going to do well wherever he goes. Initially, I was like, why did they cut Kevin Lee? And then I remembered that he lost 5 of his last 7 fights.
Right.
With that being said, he had some tough weight cuts and weight cutting issues. He had staph infection.
It's gone through camps too.
Yeah. It really, since his coach passed away, he's been lost since then. I know he went to TriStar, right? I don't know if that's the perfect fit for him, but he did well against Gillespie. He KO'd Gillespie, and he's a top level UFC talent. So I just think he has a lot of potential. He hasn't quite reached it, but you see it's there. So I don't understand why they cut him unless, they're just paying him simply too much money for where he's at currently, or they see potential issues,
Right. That's interesting. Like, so talking about too much money for where he's at. Now, somebody we haven't heard that was cut, but we were talking about was moved from the rankings was Duranamine, GDR. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if she's cut, but if she was, the first thing I thought of was like not a terribly exciting fighter necessarily. She's got a few finishes here, but she doesn't finish you, they're usually boring fights. But she's a former champion. She probably makes X amount of money, and they probably don't want to pay that. I feel
not well liked by the fan base either.
No. She didn't want to fight Cyborg.
She cheap shot at Holly Holm in the featherweight, debut of the of the weight division like multiple times.
Yeah.
She's not a liked fighter either. So
Right.
she's not popular. She's not exciting. You got to be on the ball. You got to be getting wins, and she's inactive.
Right. Yeah. So I just don't think there's enough. She's one, if she does end up, and I mean, they could end up working out a deal too. You never know. But she's one I could see. She probably would be a better fit in a Bellator or someplace like that too. Because, if she's changed her mind, she probably could have a fight with Cyborg there and make some money now. And there could be a little story off of that or something.
Get knocked out. Yeah, hopefully.
Well, yeah, I know it's going to happen, probably, but nonetheless. What's funny about that, though, is like, she's a strong woman. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
she's a great Muay Thai kickboxer. But
it's interesting that she did not want that fight at all. I've always found that peculiar.
Right.
Yeah. So, we'll see what happens there. Obviously, getting back to UFC, big fight card this weekend. Well, I don't know about the card itself. We were talking about this. There's a few fights on here. I know you're most excited about the main and co-main event, but I did see our boy Clay Guida is on this card too, though.
Jamal Hill's on the card.
Against Jimmy Crute.
Against Jimmy Crute. That's a good fight. Yeah, that's a prelim fight. There's a couple earlier fights that are pretty good, but it's really the main and co-main I'm super excited for.
Brian Bam Bam Barberina.
Yeah, Barberina, yeah.
He's on there. Clay Guida against Leonardo Santos. Probably Leonardo's probably get the win. Guida's, I don't know.
It doesn't matter if he wins at this point. He's just exciting to watch.
He is. It's just good to see out there. Now, let's talk about this co-main event a little bit here. You were talking me more about this fight when we were off air. So, Brad Riddell and Rafael Fiziev.
Oh, yes. Brad Riddell, he fights out of the City Kickboxing camp. That's out of Sonya's camp and Dan Hooker. Both these guys. So, Brad Riddell is undefeated in the UFC.
Yeah.
He just beat Drew Dober, I'm pretty sure. So, that's like his marquee win in the UFC. Double check that for me. I'm pretty sure it's Drew Dober. Okay, yeah.
I'm looking at it right now. And he also beat Magomed Mustafa like 2 fights before that.
Mm-hmm.
Split decision win, which is the only loss Aziz has in the UFC.
Right. So they have a mutual opponent. That was a split decision, like you said, win. And then Fiziev got, an unlucky back fist from Magomed that knocked him out. I think that was his first UFC fight, and he's won everyone since then.
It was. He's got like fight of the night 2 times and performance of the night.
Yeah,
he's excited.
He's a very good like kickboxer. He's known. I remember before he was in the UFC. He's done it since he's been in the UFC as well. But I remember this clip as a GIF of someone throwing a side or a round kick towards his chest, and it was as the bell had gone off, and he just matrix bent over backwards as the kick went over the top of him. He actually did it in the UFC as well, but he's just an exciting fighter. His stand-up is very, very good. Both guys go to decision a lot, though, in the UFC, so I think this might be a very good stand-up war that probably goes to decision.
Yeah,
I'm going to go with Fiziev for the win, I think.
Yeah, he's got a lot of Muay Thai championships, too. I'm looking at it now. Very impressive. Yeah, based off what I'm looking at, even though they have the common opponent, it does kind of look like Fiziev just got caught. I'm going to lean – I think you're right. I'm going to say it just goes to decision, and Fiziev gets the win. And I'd like to tell you it'd be fight of the night possibly, but this main event could also be fight of the night.
Could be fight of the year.
Yeah, Jose Aldo, Rob Font. I always like to shout out the story of Rob Font. I was married before. He knocked out one of my brother-in-laws in a fight.
Shout out Rob Font.
Rob Font, he's a good man, getting the work done. There's also a story about him too, like where I think he was delivering pizzas. I talked about this before. He saw them doing MMA on some mats in a garage, and he's like, "What's that?" And what a story! Now this guy is fighting Jose Aldo.
Right.
This is probably a title eliminator too. Like if he
think so.
Yeah, he's definitely probably got a shot. Font is coming off that victory, correct me if I'm wrong, too, over Cody Garbrandt. And he also has wins over Marlon Moraes.
I think he beat Sergio Pettis at one point as well.
Just before the Ricky Simon fight, he beat the current Bellator champion, Sergio Pettis. So, yeah, Thomas Almeida. There's a couple losses in his career here and there, but all by, well, except for Munoz. He got caught in a choke, but most of the other losses are by decision. He's got an early loss in his career, too.
He's really turned it on the last, like, 4 fights or so, though. He's like, grown. He's another level. His boxing, everyone says they're the best boxer in the UFC. He has an argument, I think.
Yeah, he's really looked great, and against Jose Aldo, who coming off his victories over Marlon Vera and Pedro Munoz, it's interesting because before this, like Aldo had his losses, like I think it's like Volkanovski, Marlon Moraes. Like
he's only lost to champions because that Marlon Moraes fight, he didn't lose that. That was a split decision where he got robbed. He absolutely got robbed. So he's only lost to McGregor. His recent losses, I think he's lost to Holloway, McGregor, Volkanovski, and then Petr Yan, right? Yeah. So those are all champions.
Right.
Some of the best fighters ever.
Even the Moraes one that he didn't win, like it was close. Like Moraes has been a champion in other promotions too. He's not looked at his last couple fights. I think that should tell you about that fight too. Moraes' trajectory's kind of been on a decline, whereas Aldo has looked really good after that. He lost that fight to Yan, but he came out strong. Just a question, like Petr Yan's been doing this to everybody though. Like doesn't matter how strong you come out, Yan will just keep putting the pressure and the pressure and pressure. And, that was only Aldo's second fight at bantamweight. Mm-hmm. So, like, he did Moraes in his debut, right, which I'd like to see that fight now, see how it goes. And then he does Yan in the second fight ever. So, since then, now he's had a little experience at bantamweight. He's beaten Marlon Vera and Pedro Munoz, and he's doing it.
Yeah, he beat Cheeto and Pedro. Those are 2 top-level bantamweights, and bantamweight's a super stacked division. So,
yeah, I mean, this guy's been the UFC featherweight champion twice. I'm just looking at some accomplishments here. He was an interim champ. He had most successful title defenses in UFC featherweight history at 7. Most consecutive title defenses, so 7 as well. Fight of the night 4 times. Performance of the night twice. He's a former world extreme cage championship fighting champion. Like he's a legend. And I want to say, I'm looking at it now, he's 36 years old. So, he's not old. He's been around for a while. He looks good still, despite all his fights. Okay.
So Rob Font is not young either. He's 34 or 35. We always think Aldo's so old just because he has so many fights. Mm-hmm. So, he has a lot of miles, but he's, in the prime, the tail end of his prime, for sure, of his career. But Font is also, he's up there and he still looks great. So,
yeah. Well, Font, I feel like is gaining even more steam. But Font has also not had the miles on his career that Aldo's had.
Right. He has like half the fights.
Right. And Font, listen to his comments too. He's fight of the night 3 times. Performance of the night 3 times. Fight of the night once. He's held a regional featherweight champion when he was starting out. So, these guys, this is going to be a good fight, knockout fight. This is a real hard fight to pick. I don't know if it goes to decision. If it goes to decision, though, I'm kind of leaning towards Aldo either way. I'm going to say Font's best chance is a decision, though, because I don't know if he can knock out Aldo. Whereas I do think Aldo could knock him out. That's just my opinion. I'm going to go, maybe with my heart a little bit here. I do want Font to win. I like Aldo, but Font's just, I got a soft spot for him. So he knocked out my brother-in-law, so he's a good dude as far as I'm concerned.
He's also local to us.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen him fight live. I went to Boston, so I like him. I hope he gets it done. I'm going to say 5-round decision.
I agree with you. I think if Font's going to win, that's probably his best chance. It is possible Jose gasses out, late in the fight and Font swarms him. I just think that Jose has a more diverse, repertoire of abilities. So if it goes to the ground, which I don't think it does, neither guy wants to go to the ground. Aldo has the advantage, but also the diversity of Jose Aldo's strikes, where he'll throw more kicks and flying knees and all that stuff that Font has to worry about. Whereas Aldo's boxing's very good. He throws super hard and very accurate body strikes, especially as Jeremy Stevens.
Yeah.
But Font's going to have more to worry about with Aldo coming at him and trying to dodge his punches and all that. I think technically he's the better boxer, but he can get swarmed with power. So I'm going to go with Aldo. It hurts me saying I do like Aldo, but like you, I'm definitely more of a fan of Rob Font. And I think Aldo probably TKOs him in the 4th round.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see it. I think the key to the victory for Font will be he's just going to have to be very strategic. He's going to have to be safe, put the pressure on, but also like not engage and watch out for those leg kicks, even though Aldo doesn't use them as much still. I just think Aldo is just – he's so well rounded. Unless this is like, those fights are finally catching up to him. Like, he's definitely got to be the favorite in my eyes. But I'm going to pick with my heart this time. I'm going to go Rob Font, 5-round decision, squeaks it out.
It's going to be a good fight no matter what.
Yeah. Watch the fights. So we'll be back next week. Actually, I want to tell them one more time what we're doing.
That's right. So December 11th, we're going to be doing UFC 269, Oliveira versus Dustin Poirier. December 18th, we're going to have a fight night, Derek Lewis versus Chris Dukakis, big heavyweight fight. And then at the end of the year, on Christmas Day, we're going to have a wrap-up show for the entire year, favorite fights and all that. And then starting January 1st, we're going to do a preview show for, who we think is going to lose their belts, who's going to be the new champs, what fights we want to see in 2022.
That's right. So stuff to look forward to. Until then, should be a good weekend of fights. I think by the time this airs, you might, at least on the audio version for sure, you're probably already going to have seen the Bellator fight. So we'll see how our boy Sergio does against.
Yeah, look for us in the crowd.
Yeah, we'll see. Might be boxies, man. I don't know. See how we doing. But anyway, yeah. Until next time, we'll see you right here, Combat Podcast, baby.